Okay, so let me start. And today we are going to start on a new topic. This is called hypothesis testing. So this is essentially a method of testing your theories. Method of, for now, I'm just using colloquial language, method of testing or verifying your theories. Theories about anything you care, any question you have in mind. So basically you want to make some decisions about some situation by posing a question, and based on data and a systematic method, you want to answer, you want to make that decision, you want to answer that question, and this is called the hypothesis testing. So making decisions about questions based on data, and this data obviously will be just most of the time a finite sample because you don't have infinite resources. And you want to come up with a systematic method for this. And this is what this topic is about. So the way you make the decisions is by first putting forward a hypothesis. So first, put forward a hypothesis. So what's the hypothesis? It's just a claim about something. So you believe that something is true. Even if you don't believe, you just make a statement about it. Make a claim about some question which you are confronting. So put forward a hypothesis, give an answer for that question, and then based on data, put forward a hypothesis, and based on data, try to refute it. Put a hypothesis, and then based on data, you are trying to refute it. So this is extremely important, that you're not taking data, you are not trying to prove it. Rather, you are going in the opposite direction. You make a claim, and as they say that the burden of proof is on someone who makes a claim, but here you do not collect directly evidence for this hypothesis. You try to collect evidence and try to kill this hypothesis. So in a sense, you can say that science, I'm using in very general term, any knowledge you want to gain statistically by a systematic study of the data available to you, that I'm calling science. At least theoretically, ideally you want this from science, that science is about trying to kill theories. Not prove them. So a true scientist, they don't believe in their theories. Anytime they have a theory at their hand, they are all the time trying to refute it, trying to prove it wrong, trying to find faults in it. And that's how your knowledge moves forward. So that's the main gist of what we will be doing. We will make claims, hypotheses, and then try to refute them. So when you are trying to run this process, making a claim, making a hypothesis, and using data to try to refute this hypothesis. So you want to make, as we have been doing in this course, you want to make precise statements about what is the probability that your conclusion about the hypothesis is correct. So make precise statistical statements about what? Your goal is only one. Your goal is that you have a hypothesis, a claim, and you want to test it. And the direct test is that the direct goal is that you want to refute it. So if you refute it, then you want to make statements about it, that how much confident you are about your statement. Because you always have only finite amount of data. You can always have more evidence coming your way. So you are not 100% sure any of the time. So how sure you are? What is the probability that your conclusion about a decision on this hypothesis, if it's valid or not, how sure you are about that, you want to make that precise statement. And so since we are never 100% sure, because we always have finite data, so you do not have 100% surety. Make precise statistical statements in terms of probability of your conclusion on the hypothesis being correct. Yeah. Which one? Green. First put forward a hypothesis and based on data, try to refute it. So based on data means you want based on evidence. You have a claim and you are collecting evidence in its favor or against it. And based on that evidence, you are trying to decide on it. Now there can always be more evidence coming your way. There's not ever 100% of evidence. So any decision you make has a probability of being wrong. And that's what you want to, as best as you can, you want to decide over here. Want to give a quantitative measure of how sure you are about your decision. So you can say that you never prove things. You just gather more and more evidence in their favor or against them. By thing, I mean hypothesis. Whatever you claims there are in the world, they're never proven. The precise thing to say is that you are getting evidence in their favor or you are getting evidence against them. And based on how much evidence you have got in either direction, you make a statistical judgment call that how much trust you have in this hypothesis being true. So you can say that the proofs, you never prove things. Proofs are for mathematical statements only. All other conclusions are statistical in nature. And there is a probability associated with them. Probability associated with them for conclusion being wrong. So only math is certain because you start with certain assumption and your statements are based on this assumption. The logical conclusions are the following. But the real world questions are not of that kind. You make a statement and you gather evidence in favor or against them. And whatever conclusion you have, there's always room to improve it. Or there's always a chance of that conclusion being wrong. So let me just, so this is like the overview of what we are trying to do, what this subject of hypothesis testing is about. Let me now go ahead with the steps you will be taking in the process of hypothesis testing. So steps involved. First of all, the first step is make a hypothesis. This is the very first step. You have to make a precise statement which you want to test based on that data. And you're starting, so you propose it as a starting statement and you are assuming that it's true. And then you are trying to gather data against it or in favor of it. So this is called, your starting hypothesis is called the null hypothesis. And in the book we are using is denoted by H0. So the next step would be gather evidence. In our case, it would be a statistical evidence using, well, in real world, it's always some kind of a statistical evidence. So gather evidence using a sample. But sample, I mean, just whatever way you have available to you to make a decision about it. And it's always a finite number, finite amount of evidence which you analyze. So that's why it's a sample. And this is very important, trying to reject it. It will become clear very soon that why it's important that we try to reject it. Well, in a sense, that's what you can do because you're starting with an assumption that this is true. And now you are saying that does this statement holds true in the face of evidence? In the face of evidence, is it justifiable to refute it, reject it? So if you have enough evidence, to reject it, then you simply say the hypothesis has been rejected. So this is one possibility, that based on the evidence, based on the data, your starting hypothesis is rejected. If this doesn't happen, then this happens. If you don't have enough evidence, otherwise, you say that it's you failed to reject the hypothesis. Wait, just one moment. So these are the two possibilities. Either you go out, you have the data, you have the evidence, and that evidence suggests that this hypothesis probably is not true. So then you reject it. If you don't have enough evidence, because that's what you are doing, what you are trying to do all the time. But if you don't have enough evidence to conclude this, then the alternative is failed to reject. And it's very important to note that the alternative is not that you proved it. You don't say that you proved it. You say that you have failed to reject. Not, it's not equal to proved. Not even verified. This language is extremely important. Either you reject or you fail to reject. So you had a question? I'll give you some, homeworks. Now the question arises. So I said over here, enough evidence. So the question arises that how much evidence is enough before you reject? So this is a natural question. How much evidence before you reject? Obviously, there's always room for collecting more evidence, and this statement that you have rejected the hypothesis should have a probability associated with it. You can't be 100%. So if you are able to quantify that probability, then you say that you have a certain significance level. So significance level which is denoted as alpha, is probability that your conclusion of rejecting the hypothesis is wrong. So this is, what is this saying? This is saying that you got the evidence, and based on that evidence, as you collect more and more evidence, it's telling you that you better reject this hypothesis. Now it is your judgment call based on your methods that even in the face of this evidence, what is the probability that your conclusion of rejecting it could be wrong? So if you can make that quantitative statement, that would be the significance level of your decision. And you want it to be small because you don't want to reject the hypothesis while it's true. So the game is to reduce the significance level. But of course, the opposite could be true as well. The hypothesis could be wrong, and you may not simply have enough evidence to reject it. So it could be wrong. And so ideally, if you have good enough evidence, you should be able to reject it. But you may not have enough evidence and you may not reject it. So we will also fail to reject it despite having sampled the data. So that possibility is also there. So this would be also sort of a failure that the hypothesis was wrong, but you were not able to reject it. And there will be a probability associated with it depending on how you are testing your hypothesis. So there are these following possibilities. Possibilities after gathering evidence. You have a null hypothesis, H naught. Now, in reality, it could be true or it could be false. You don't know it. You are trying to decide. And these are your decisions. So remember, what two possible decisions are there? There are only two possible decisions: reject or failed to reject. Now, if H naught is true and you have good quality of evidence, you should actually be doing this. You should be failing to reject it, right? Because H naught is true and you are getting evidence, that evidence should be in favor of this statement, this hypothesis. So that evidence should not be pointing you towards rejecting this hypothesis. So you would ideally conclude this, you will fail to reject. And that would be the correct decision. But obviously you cannot be sure. Your evidence can be misleading, especially if it's of statistical nature, it can point you to wrong direction. And although it is true, the hypothesis is true, you could still end up rejecting it. And if you reject it, there will be a probability associated with it. This is the significance level. This is kind of an error.
Please repeat this part.
So the hypothesis, whatever you may, I'll give you examples very shortly. Hypothesis you made, well, God knows that this is true. In reality, it is true, but you don't know. You gather evidence and you come to one of these decisions. If the state of the nature is such that the hypothesis is true, then your correct decision should have been that fail to reject. But there is a probability, alpha, that despite this statement being true, you will end up rejecting it. This would be a wrong conclusion, but there's a probability that you will make a wrong conclusion. That's the main point. Evidence will not always lead you to the truth. That's why it's called the evidence. It's not like a perfect, it's not a theorem. It's only an evidence. It's not a proof. So you will end up rejecting it sometimes by mistake. And what is the probability of that? So we will be devising tests, and those tests will have an inbuilt probability. We will be able to make a statement about what is the probability that we are going to make a wrong decision over here. So if the statement is true, but you end up rejecting it, it's an error. And this is called a type 1 error. And there's a corresponding probability of this happening. And that is called the significance level. And you want this to be small. The smaller it is, the better it is for you. Because then there's a small probability that you will be making an error. But the state of nature could be that the statement which you started from, the hypothesis, was wrong. Then the correct decision would be the following. It should be that you should be rejecting it. But again, You may not have enough evidence, you may not be able to do it, and you may fail to reject. Despite this being false, the statement being false, you may not have good quality of evidence and you may fail to reject. This would be called a type 2 error. And there would be a probability associated with it, beta. Depending on this state, that how far, in what way the statement is false. This probability depends on in what way H naught is false. And so if this is beta, then this probability that the statement is false and you actually do reject it would be 1 minus beta, and this is called the power of decision. Now this alpha and beta, they are related, but not in a simple way. And the decision process you will design will usually take care of alpha. You will design it keeping in mind alpha. And depending on what alpha you have, you can sometimes compute with some effort the beta, the probability of if the statement is false and still failing to reject it, you can compute beta, but there will be no simple relationship between them. And this beta will not only depend on alpha, it will also depend on in what way the statement is wrong. So most of the time, to start your decision process, you are not concerned with beta, you are concerned with alpha. So significance level is most important in our decisions. I should say in our methods of getting to a decision. So let's look at an example. These are not quantitative examples, they are all just meant to explain the theoretical concepts. So you have a hypothesis. Hypothesis is people who eat fast food, let's say 5 times a week, are obese on average. So what do I mean by that? That means people who eat fast food 5 times a week, my statement about them is that their average BMI, not every one of them is going to be fat, but the average BMI is greater than 30. Now, how will you test it? How will you test this statement? Yeah, so because it's not going to be like everyone is not going to have same BMI. It's going to be a range. So you go out, you pick a sample. So get a sample of all those people who eat fast food 5 times a day. And you see many people in sample. For example, you see many people with BMI less than 30. And the average BMI of the sample turns out to be less than 30. So what should be your conclusion? Is this H0 rejected?
Yes, sir, it's not rejected.
Well, rejected, but couldn't it just happen by chance, by a probability that, because we know that even those people who eat fast food, there's a more or less a normal range of BMI. Even someone eating fast food can be thin. So it could be just by a probability that you selected a few such individual, even by a random chance, that their BMIs were less than 30. Yeah, but suppose you have exhausted your samples. This is like the best you could do. What you're suggesting also makes sense. But given one sample size, what is your conclusion? Your conclusion would be like if you start seeing many people with BMI less than 30, and if the sample average, the more it is less than, is going towards the other end of 30, the higher the chances is that this is not just a statistical fluctuation. This is not just by chance. Then you are getting more and more confident that actually this statement is wrong, right? So the more the sample average is less than 30, the more people you see in the sample which have less weight than 30, the more confident you become that this is probably not because of by a chance that I picked these people. Maybe it's just not true that people who eat. Well, you can never reject it completely. That's the point. You are getting more and more sure. So that's the whole point. You can, even though, even if the hypothesis is correct, you could still see in your sample the average to be less than this. So it depends that what kind of criteria you want to put in. If the sample average is, let's say, 29, do you want to reject it? You won't be very confident. If it's 25, you will be probably more confident in rejecting the hypothesis now. And if you see many, many numbers below, let's say 23, then you are getting more and more sure that this is probably not, this hypothesis is not true. And it depends on two things. First of all, if your sample size is larger. If sample size is larger, then you know that larger sample sizes have less fluctuations. They have less standard deviation. You do not expect to, by chance, although you selected like 100 people, that by chance you just, by a fluke, got all those who had less BMI. Although the population has a BMI of more than 30, but just by chance you picked 100 people who all had lesser BMI. So larger the sample, the less is the probability of you making, not being able to reject it. Also, it depends on what is the average you get over here. If the average is close to 30, because we know that when you pick a sample, we get a normal distribution. Even if the average is 30, in a sample, you will get a normal distribution. So if you get the sample mean somewhere here, you're not that confident. But if you get a sample mean here, you know that if the average were 30, you couldn't get this sample mean so far away. So it all turns out that you have to devise a criteria. So you have to devise a criteria when you will reject. So keeping in consideration all these factors, you have to devise a criteria when you will reject and assign a significance level to it. Because we are not going by hunt. It's not like we see some very small number and we just make, well, looks like that this is rejected. We should have a systematic procedure based on statistical logic, based on mathematical thinking, that what probability we associate to our confidence that we are rejecting this hypothesis. So you have to design a test. So like in this example, the test will call for that pick a sample of this size. And then if the sample average is less than a certain number, then based on that, I have a certain significance level, which gives you a definite significance level. Well, it could be the other way around. It could be that you got the sample and you got a BMI average of more than 30. What would you say then? You would say that you failed to reject the hypothesis. So if you reject the hypothesis, you have a definite probability associated with it of it being wrong. On the other hand, if you fail to reject, then our tests are such, we design our tests by keeping this probability in mind. There's no probability associated with if you fail to reject. You do not usually have a probability of this conclusion being true. So all you can say, I failed to reject it. You have more confidence in this being true, but you do not have a specific number, the way I have described things to you. So therefore, to gather evidence in favor of some proposition, you usually suppose the opposite of that hypothesis. So strategy to gather evidence in favor of a hypothesis, assume the opposite hypothesis. By opposite, I mean that if this hypothesis is not true, this was your null hypothesis. If this is not true, then what would be true if this statement is false? There will be some other statement which also is called the alternate hypothesis. So like in our previous example, The alternate hypothesis would be people who eat 5 times a week fast food, they still have average BMI less than 30. So you assume the opposite. What will happen then? So either you will fail to reject it, or if you reject it, then you have proved your original hypothesis which you wanted to prove, but with a certain probability, with a certain number associated with it. So when you fail, when you reject H1, you have accepted, you shouldn't say proved, you have accepted H1 with a certain probability. And with H1, the chances of H1 being wrong to be very small. H0. So let's consider an example. So suppose there's a brand and they are hoping to capture, let's say it's a shoe brand, and they are hoping to capture 20% of the market. And based on that, they want to make further decision about the investment. So they need strong evidence in favor of hypothesis that their market share is greater than 20%. So if they start with this null hypothesis that the market share is greater than 20%, and then they go out, they pick a sample, do some survey, they gather evidence, and run a decision test, whatever test they have devised, what will happen? They will either fail to reject it or they will reject it with a significance alpha. So if they do reject it with a significance alpha, then it's a damper. They know they haven't gotten their desired share of the market. But if they fail to reject this hypothesis, they're not sure. They don't have any quantitative statement about, they don't have strong evidence in favor. All they did was they failed to reject this hypothesis. So instead, they should start with this. Should choose the null hypothesis this null hypothesis that which is the opposite. Market share is less than 20%. Again, what would be the conclusion? Either they will fail to reject it, but if they do reject it, and they had devised a test, let's say this was just 2% chance of this being wrong. So if they do end up rejecting this hypothesis, then they can say that we do have, this has been rejected, this hypothesis has been rejected. So the alternate hypothesis that the market share is more than 20% is true, then this is true. And there's only a 2% chance of this statement being wrong. So you always, so it's most of the time it's a good strategy that if you want to gather evidence in favor of something, then you assume the opposite and try to reject the opposite. So the rule of thumb, well, let me give you some more examples. So suppose some people claim, now these null hypothesis, what you call null hypothesis is your own choice. It's not like one is null and the other is alternate. It's your own choice. So suppose there's a group of people and they say that highway speed limits should be increased. Because obviously higher speed means less time of travel, but there are other people who say it's going to cause more accident. So for these guys, they claim no. If you increase it by 10 km/h, it's not going to increase the average number of accidents in a month. So their starting hypothesis is, their null hypothesis is higher speeds don't cause accidents. And their alternate is higher speeds cause more accidents. But the other group who are against this increased speeds, they will say, no, that's not my starting statement. I believe higher speeds do cause more accidents. So if this group comes up, they say, I'm going with this hypothesis. They can say, I'm going with this hypothesis. You reject my hypothesis. So usually the rule of thumb is person making a claim should bring evidence in their favor. That means their starting hypothesis should not be taken as the starting point, because you want to make this statement, bringing this evidence, they should bring the evidence, hence reject the alternate hypothesis. So that means if this group comes up and they say, let's make the motorway speeds 140, and they just claim it, you say no. You have brought a claim We are going to assume the alternate hypothesis that the higher speeds do cause higher accidents, and you try to refute it. In that way, in going through this route, you can gather strong evidence. You can make use of the word of the strong evidence, because then you will be able to assign probabilities to the statements you make. So one can make an analogy with criminal trials. So the prosecution comes and they say this person has committed a crime. So they are making a claim. So they should bring strong evidence in their favor. And we know to get the strong evidence in favor of a statement, we have to assume the opposite. Assume the opposite and refute that. So the starting, that's why in criminal courts, the null hypothesis is always that the accused is innocent. As they say, innocent until proven guilty. So this is your null hypothesis. This is the starting hypothesis. And now the prosecutors try to present evidence to reject it. And if you have, as they say, a preponderance of evidence, too much evidence is coming in, and you can say, based on prosecution's evidence, if there is a very small chance, well, based on prosecution's evidence, the judge is able to reject this null hypothesis with a very small chance of being wrong. So when you reject, you have a corresponding significance level. So there will be so much evidence that the judge can conclude there's like literally, let's say, a 5% chance that I'm wrong. So they then reject the starting hypothesis, and then the alternate hypothesis that the accused is a criminal is accepted, and they're sent to jail. But you should notice that even in this case, there is a chance that some accused, so if this significance level is set at 5%, that would mean that on average, 5% of people who are convicted are innocent. So you have to tolerate some amount of significance level, because you can never prove anything without a shadow of doubt. There's always some doubt. So you accept some, and based on that, you reject it. On the other hand, if the prosecution is not able to present enough evidence to reject this, then you stay with it. Then you say, fail to reject, and the person is released. But you can't say that they were not criminal. All you say is that you failed to prove them guilty. So any question? So this is a kind of a very important point, that if you want to prove some statement with strong evidence, with a quantitative amount of probability, you should be assuming the opposite. I really want to give you a few more examples. So suppose there is some animal rights group and they have a problem with horse racing, horses being excessively whipped during the races. And they know that the racing industry, so there's this animal rights group. And on the other side is the racing industry. So they know that the racing industry, they're not gonna care if we just make arguments based on compassion. So they say that you should not excessively whip. Well, you can define it by some, let me just put whipping by saying 10 whips per furlong or something. So they make a claim, they say, well, you shouldn't excessively whip because if you whip more, it doesn't increase horse's speed. Well, actually the horse gets distressed and he feels more pain. So it actually reduces the horse's speed. So, and they claim that we have strong evidence in this favor, and they want to present it to the horse racing industry. And when people ask them, what is your strong evidence? Well, they say, we believe, how could it not be that if you whip them so much, they will be distressed, they won't be able to put in their full efforts. And the racing industry has not been able to prove us wrong on this. They haven't provided us evidence. That would not be on their part bringing strong evidence because they made a claim. So they should be the ones providing evidence. And how can they provide evidence? They assume the opposite. So what could be the opposite? So let's suppose there is some standard average speed, let's say 50 kilometers per hour, which is of a fast horse. Now what they do, they assume this. Whipped horses run at 50 kilometers per hour or more. And now they get data, they look at the speeds of some horses in some races, and based on that data, they find that there are lots of horses who are excessively whipped. They actually run much slower than the speed. So they are able to reject it. And if they have a lot of horses who are behaving this way, reject it with a high significance. Let's say some. Now they have presented strong evidence. Because they disproved, they rejected the alternate hypothesis, which was the hypothesis of the racing industry. While the same situation will be reversed if the initial claim was different. So for suppose there's some city council and the city council has banned in their area. And the racing industry comes in and they say, well, it's all very good, except that the standards of our races are going down, the horses are running slower, and that's causing us revenue loss. So they say you should, and the city council says we will consider your request if you can show that if you whip horses, their speed does increase. So now what would be the starting hypothesis? The hypothesis should be that whipped horses run slower than 50. Because you start with this, but then you show like there's all these horses, when they were whipped, they ran much faster. And then you are able to reject it. Reject it depending on how much data you got, how many horses were running faster than 50, and by what speed, how much they were exceeding this 50 mark, you will be gathering strong evidence that it does help to make horses run faster. So then this would be starting. And if you reject it, then you have proven your case. If you fail to reject it, then obviously you failed. Then your claim was wrong. But if you start with just this claim that whipping increases the speed, then you can never prove your claim. You can never give a statistical significance to your claim, at least with simple methods, because if this is rejected, then you have lost your case. But if it's not rejected, then you haven't supplied a number in favor of your claim. So this was just some ideas which are involved in hypothesis testing. Now let's come to some specific methods for some specific populations we will be using. And the starting methods are just to set up the scene. They will not be like what you expect to encounter in real life. So the first case, so as always, the first case is when you know something about the population, which is usually not the case, but this is just discussed to set up the theory that how these methods are gonna be modified to consider the cases where you don't know anything about the population. So hypothesis testing for the mean of a normal population. By normal, I mean normally distributed population. When variance of population is known. So someone makes a claim about a population that some characteristic of that population has a certain mean. And the population you assume that is normally distributed. This part is kind of true a lot of times. Many of the attributes in nature are normally distributed, but later on we will relax this as well. And there is going to be a mean, but you don't know what the mean is. Someone claims that this is the mean, mu. They have some knowledge and that's why they claim. And you want to test it if this is right or wrong. In practice, if you don't know the mean, it's very unlikely that you will know this standard deviation either. But I'm just for now assuming that suppose if you know the standard deviation. So then how would you test this hypothesis? So the null hypothesis is that the mean of the population is a certain number, mu naught. And you take the alternate for some reason you have the suspicion that it's not mu naught, maybe it's more than mu naught. So you take the alternate that it's, the population mean is more than mu naught. Now it's quite clear that if this were true, if the mean was really mu naught, we know, if this is mu naught, we know that when we take a sample, the sample mean is not always comes out to be mu naught. It's distributed around here. And it's distributed normally around it. So that the mean of the sample mean, so X is the sample mean, X bar. Mean of the sample mean is still mu, which is the mean of the population. If the mean of the population would really be mu naught, then you know that your sample would be distributed something like that. In the sample, you take a sample and you compute the mean, it will land somewhere here. So how can you reject that the mean is mu naught? If you get a number far away over here, then obviously you suspect that if the true mean is mu naught, in the sample, I couldn't get this. And you know this standard deviation, because this you know is just standard deviation of the sample. So to reject this, you can pick a certain probability. So let's say you say this probability is alpha. So you take this critical value, and if the sample mean is more than this critical value, then you will reject it. And how will you find this critical value? Well, you know that if I compute this, if this were really the true mean, then the standard normal would be computed. This standard normal, which I have drawn over here, would be computed like this. And if it's more than, if it turns out that when I compute this out of my sample mean, if this is more than the critical value, what is the critical value? Your desired probability of Z being more than ZC. This one, let's draw here. This is the Z variable. There's some ZC. And this probability is alpha. You pick out, given this small number, you choose a small number, let's say 0.05, 5%, and you pick this critical value, then this should be, if this is true, you reject it. So from here, you get the sample mean So it's the same idea which I drew here. There was a claim that the population mean is mu naught. If the sample mean is too much displaced away from it, then you reject it. Reject if true, if this is the case. And you have a certain significance level associated with it. Alpha. Why? Because it's this same probability that you will get a number outside this range only with a very small chance. Even if mu naught is true, even if the true mean is mu naught, so even if the hypothesis is true, you can get a number in this range beyond greater than X bar because of this normal distribution, but with a very small probability. So you now have a control over this probability. You pick this alpha which is your significance level. And from here you compute the critical value of your standard normal, and then you can compute this value. I should call it now critical C. Critical sample mean. If your mean of your sample is more than that, then you reject it. And you also give a significance level to this rejection. So any question? If there are no question, I'll stop here.